is the Chappiness Guy. Welcome to another episode of Vestibular Talks. Today we're going to mix things up a little bit. We're going to interview Laura. Laura is a woman that healed her autoimmune chronic condition naturally. Her condition doesn't really have to do much with the vestibular system, but it's equally as important because she's going to talk about how chronic illness changed her life and the steps and processes that she followed in order to get better. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Find your happiness, guys. All right, Laura, we're live.
Excellent.
How are you
Hello.
today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you for being part of this episode of Vestibular Talks. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, Laura, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, your journey?
Of course. So I first was diagnosed with I wasn't diagnosed. I had symptoms 6 years ago, and it started very much in the bladder. I had pain, I had burning. I'd actually had a retained tampon, which is where a tampon had been stuck within the pelvis. I hadn't realized that it was there, and it had been there for about a month. So as you can imagine, that set off a host of health issues. So then I was told I had something called bacterial vaginosis, which is pretty much like thrush. I don't know if it's as heard of, but it's as common. But it's a bacterial version. And when I got that, I was told that was pretty normal because I'd had a retained tampon.
Yeah.
So at that stage, I didn't worry too much. I thought, okay, that makes sense. So I was on my merry way out of the doctors with antibiotics and told it would probably disappear within a week. A week passed and my symptoms didn't get any better. In fact, they got worse. So here kind of lied a couple of weeks going back and forth to the doctors, being given more antibiotics, and then being given something that is called pessaries, which is liquid you actually place into the pelvic region.
Okay.
As soon as that started is really when my nightmare began, because when I used the first pessary, and I remember it very, very clearly, December 2014, I felt this burning, this absolute pain burning. I felt the need to go to the bathroom all the time. Even when I went to the bathroom, I never felt relief. And then I got diagnosed with UTIs. For about 4 months, sometimes that was based on symptoms, sometimes that was done on dip tests. And that happened for about 3 months. And it just wasn't going away. I'd always suffered with UTIs ever since I was a teenager. At this point, I was 29 years old. And I couldn't understand why the antibiotics weren't working. It also felt like the worst UTI I'd ever had. I then went to A&E, and I remember that very clearly to say, I think I've got another UTI. This was within the January. And again, they ran a dip test, but this time was different. This is when they turned around and told me the alarming words that there is no active infection. So I said, you'll have to test again because there's something seriously wrong with my body. At this time, I was going to the bathroom 70 times a day.
Wow.
So imagine that for a moment, 70 times a day. The pain was, every time I was going to the bathroom, I was holding onto the radiator, screaming in pain, as it felt like razor blades. It felt like shards of glass, like burning acid leaving my bladder every time I would urinate. Even when I wasn't in the bathroom, I felt excruciating pain. I felt I needed the bathroom, sense of urgency. And basically, for the next few months, I had test after test after test. Nobody could tell me what was wrong. Every test I was having was coming back clear. I had gynecological tests because I thought it was pelvic related originally. nobody wants to have anything wrong when you go to a gynecologist, but I actually did, because I wanted them to tell me what was wrong with mine. Yeah, and nobody, to ever want that is crazy. But with the moment the gynecologist said to me, everything is great down there, I was shattered, because it was another test thinking, well, what is wrong? I had MRI scans on my ovaries. At one point, I'd diagnosed myself. I thought I had cysts, but no, that came back clear. And then it came to a point, this is now 6-7 months in, so I'm really going through it at this point, just where options are running out. And where a moment I was really horrified when a doctor told me that this they thought was all in my head and that I should go and get hypnotized. And the worst thing about that is I actually went and got hypnotized, thinking they could help me in some way. But quite quickly, within 20 minutes, the hypnotherapist realized, this is nothing, that there is something wrong with you. And I said, I know. So I pushed and pushed. I asked to change doctors, obviously, after that. And they sent me to a lady who actually was very nice. But again, she was running out of options of what to do. And at this point is when I'd found myself something called Interstitial Cystitis. And I will just say the name does not do it justice. This is not like normal cystitis. I suffered normal cystitis for a long time. This was nothing like a touch of cystitis. It's just the name. And the more I read about interstitial cystitis, the more I thought, this is what I have. I'm pretty sure. Although at this point, I still told myself I didn't have it because it was chronic. You were meant to have it for life. I couldn't envisage a life with this. So as much as I knew that it was interstitial cystitis, I still was pretending that it wasn't that. I mentioned it to the doctor, and so I had to bring it up to the doctor that this was what I thought it was. This again now is in July, so we've gone through to like 9 months, and 9 months till I got a diagnosis, and she said, we'll put you in with the urologist. They can run a test called a cystoscopy, where a camera is inserted into the bladder. So that was that. I went to have the cystoscopy test. That is really hard to say. And I remember that was the first time I'd ever gone under. So anytime I'd had, under anaesthetic, was put to sleep. I remember waking up, and all I can remember is the urologist saying a lot of medical spiel that none of it made sense to me, but pretty much the line, yes, Miss Simpson, you have interstitial cystitis. And for me then, I had two feelings. I had the first feeling of relief that finally I had a diagnosis. He'd explained a lot had happened within the body, that was in the bladder, He'd seen tears, rips, ulcers, bleeding in the bladder, and a shredded urethra. So it wasn't all in my head, as I well knew. And then he told me that actually, as much as I'd read that this was chronic, actually, no, he could help me out. He was going to put me on a cocktail of medication. And then I was put on a host of medication, 12 tablets a day, steroids, numbing pain, all sorts of poison. I was put on that for the next 3 months. I was told to take 3 months. He was sure there was going to be improvements. 3 months came and went, and there was no improvement. In fact, my symptoms only got worse. And at this point, I started to put on quite a lot of weight. Other symptoms had come up, migraines, chronic migraines, fibromyalgia, aches and pains in the body, skin conditions, all sorts came up, stomach issues. My gut was in really, really bad shape. I was an absolute mess. At this point, I was bedbound. I couldn't really leave the house. Again, I was just crying on the bathroom floor in agony, unsure when this would end, because at this point we were coming up to a year. I then found he then said to me, the urologist where I lived, that he could do no more. And I had to go and find another urologist that was 4-hour round trip away from me, who offered something called Bladder Installations. And I had to pay privately for that. So I went to do that, just thinking bladder installations, that was going to heal me. That was going to be the next thing. So I got these bladder installations. I traveled this 4-hour trip weekly. Gosh, I think for about 5 or 6 months. I then heard about something called Elmiron, an American drug that was specifically designed for interstitial cystitis. He that after I begged and pleaded, he actually didn't want to put me on it, but that was the only option I could see. Started the Elmiron, and long story short, another 6-7 months passed and I felt no relief and I couldn't believe it. And I was, quite frankly, the lowest I've ever been ever in my life in terms of, understandably, depression. I was still peeing 70 times a day. The pain was unbearable. I would sit when I wasn't on the bathroom with my legs open wide to just think, can this stop? Hot water bottles became my best friend, as did a hot bath. At this point is when I found natural healing. And this was through reading books or actually getting off negative forums. When you're not very well or you suffer anything autoimmune, you can get caught up in really bad forums that give you bad advice, that are full of people who, you're all suffering with depression, understandably, but you need to find the right site. So I was on depressing sites where people were saying, I've had this 30 years, it's never healed, I'm never going to get better. And I would live and breathe and be on those sites all the time. Then eventually I started to look at natural healing sites and looking for success stories, people who had healed naturally, etc., etc. And I started to, even though I wasn't fully aware, my mind started to have hope for the first time. And I started to, the more I looked into people like Medical Medium, and who talks a lot, the medium side is one side, and I know people feel different about that, but he speaks a lot about food, the health benefits of vegetables and fruits. And when I read all of that, it just, something started to trigger in me to say, actually, there might just be something in this natural healing. Even though I'd never lived that life, I thought it was all a bit bonkers. I started to think this is maybe hope. Yep. I started to meet people who'd healed IC, who'd healed a host of things like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, fibro. I was meeting more and more people, and I was reading more of these positive stories. I read up about Dr. Morse, who is an advocate for fruits, what fruit does to the body, why it's healing, why people should have it and not be worried about sugar. So have it in abundance. It's natural. It's good sugar for you. And that was where I started my diet. I started on vegetables first and a little bit of fish. And then I gave up the fish. I watched interesting, although I know many people who've healed still with fish or meat, vegetables, it's very much your own choice where you go with this. For me, the only thing that made sense was fruits, vegetables and nuts. So I lived a diet of fruits, vegetable and nuts. And that includes potatoes, because I knew I needed fat within the diet. And potatoes are very healing. White potatoes are healing. Everybody thinks they're not. It's actually the rubbish that everybody puts on white potatoes that are the problem. They also don't make you gain a lot of weight, white potatoes, but look up white potatoes. The healing benefits are immense, as well as sweet potatoes. So then I did diet. I hit essential herbs, essential oils I used, and I very much stand by essential oils. And I did holistic dentistry. I removed all mercury from the mouth. And I found the spiritual side, the energy side, and I worked very much on meditation and the body, the mind connection to your health, the positivity, dealing with any type of stress, normal stress you get in life, to basically a very long introduction, but to where I am today, 4 years later, and I'm fully healed. I have no issue with interstitial cystitis anymore. That was meant to be chronic. It has taken me 4 years to heal. I didn't heal overnight. But yes, so a long introduction, but that's my story and where we're at.
Okay, you shared a lot of really good information. So let's rewind a little bit. When you first started feeling these symptoms because of the foreign object inside of you, what were those specific symptoms? Were you feeling migraines? Were you feeling dizzy? Were you feeling nausea? Because the toxicity from having something inside of you that is been there for a while, it can cause a lot of neurological symptoms as well. So I'm wondering, were your symptoms only physical to that specific area of your body, or you were feeling like hot flashes, itchiness?
Yeah, at that point, initially, before it was discovered that it was a tampon and I just had symptoms that said something was wrong, I only felt pelvic wise. And it was I can't tell you that it was it wasn't a pain. It was just a strange sensation down there that I can't even explain. It was just something felt off. It felt itchy. It felt just very strange. However, then when the tampon was found, my big issue, right, was toxic shock syndrome. Yeah. That's what I had. I had a toxic body, but nobody actually realized that. And that's when, different elements of my gut came, hemorrhoids came, migraines came, dizziness, nausea. Actually, after it had been removed, but I think was the infections that were all over my body. The bad bacteria. And I think there was a host of bad bacteria. This wasn't one strain of bacteria. There was a host, but this was bacteria that they weren't picking up when they were doing my UTIs. And I don't think that those dip tests they only determine the strains they know. So things like Epstein-Barr, many different things just didn't get picked up. Or it did get picked up on a UTI, but then it suddenly stopped because it was so far within my blood, within my body, the bacteria.
Yeah. The other thing, Laura, that you mentioned that is very important is that some medical doctors made you feel like this was in your head, like you were making up these symptoms, like you might have been going crazy, like you might have been exaggerating, or you were a hypochondriac. And it's unfortunate because many people are in the same position as what you described. Many people, we know our bodies better than anybody else. We know when something is not quite right, when something is off, we can feel something's off. So for doctors that are supposed to be compassionate, that are supposed to be kind, that are supposed to be supportive, to basically make you feel like, no, Laura, you're going crazy. It's unfortunate because they are dismissing something very real, and you prove them eventually that this was real, that there was something real happening to you. So how do you cope with that mentally, with thinking, is this really happening? Is it all in my head? How do you cope with that?
That was probably the hardest part, because I even had, and I knew friends were starting to doubt me, because I was going for test after test and everything was coming back. I could tell that people were starting to think, well, has she maybe become obsessed with this? And when you feel such a sensation in your body that something's wrong, you do just want to scream, how can nobody hear me? So the honest answer, I don't know how I coped. I had an inner strength that just told me, keep going. And I think don't take no for an answer. I've probably taken that into me now I've healed into life as a general, but don't take no for an answer. And don't feel like a burden. I was in the doctors every week, if not 2-3 times a week, or I was in the hospital. I wasn't just going to sit at home that this was it. I was going to get to the bottom of what was wrong with me, and they were going to find out. And I wanted to prove that doctor who told me to get hypnotized, in my head, I couldn't wait till the day I could go back and say to her, this is what I have. And I did that, by the way, when I did get diagnosed. But I think don't give up when you know there is something wrong. And that stands it so much through the journey of healing as well. But just that first instance of, I'm not going to accept this is my fate. There has to be an answer out there. There is something seriously wrong with my body, and we're going to get to the bottom. And I'm not going to accept just, that's it, Miss Simpson, we can't do any more. I'm gonna keep going until somebody tells me what was there. So yeah, I think that was probably the hardest part, was up to even the diagnosis. Even after when I got diagnosed and then I was told it was chronic, I actually think the worst part was having no diagnosis.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's a lonely road for sure. Laura, the other thing that you mentioned is healing foods. So you're right. The medical medium states eating more fruits, eating vegetables, eating potatoes. But when you go to medical books that are written by MDs or by actual doctors, they are telling you, no, stay away from fruits. Maybe have one fruit a day. Stay away from potatoes. They have too much carbohydrates. So it makes it so difficult for people because they are put in a place of, what do I do? Do I do this or do I not? Because, for example, I read a lot of books about migraines. The condition that I was diagnosed with is vestibular migraines. So they cause dizziness, virtual vertigo. So like, for example, this shirt that I'm wearing right now, I can see it in the screen. It's making me all wobbly. So I think I'm going to take it off because it's making me feel so weird. But these conditions basically are, how would I put it, so invisible and unknown that many people don't know what's the right protocol and what's not the right protocol. So I read a lot of books about conditions like this. And one book that I was reading stated, oh, you gotta drink more cow's milk. You gotta drink more cow's milk, whole milk for your migraines. But other books that I read said, nah, stay away from cow's milk. So I'm in a position that I'm like, what do I do? Do I believe the one that is saying, yes, go drink milk all day long, or no, do stay away from milk? So how do you find what works for you regarding food? What's best and what's not setting well with you?
So I think what's interesting with that is, I didn't feel the effect of the diet straight away. This isn't like I ate an orange and I suddenly felt it was the right diet. I have to be honest to say, that took me a long time to see any effect, because I knew when you heal something, particularly the bladder is like the last special organ that the body recognizes. Other organs are more vital as the body recognizes it. I smoked, for sort of 15 years before my illness. So I kind of knew my body was doing a lot of healing, but I maybe couldn't feel it or see it specifically in the bladder. So that was very much believing in the diet. I also, when you have something like interstitial cystitis, remember that my body was toxic. So anything toxic touching my body, I had it flared worse. I could feel it. So I was probably lucky in the sense, as much as I wasn't with that. But if I ate something like a pizza or whatever, the symptoms would just roar, even worse. But then again, I was in 24/7, but I almost just felt the worstness. They told me the doctor's advice of diet was you have something called an IC diet, and it takes a lot of things like chocolate, it takes alcohol out, but it tells you can still eat white chocolate and you can eat ice cream. And I was just eating all the like comfort food, but then pizza, I couldn't eat tomatoes, but I was on this diet they'd given me, but I could eat pizza just without tomato sauce. So I was just ordering pizzas with just cheese and forgetting, all the while not getting better. So I think I didn't realize any of that until I looked into natural healing. So going back to, for me, where I really became aware of food was I watched documentaries, Forks Over Knives. So that's Forks Over Knives. I watched What the Health, and I watched Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead. And those documentaries really started to tell me, like Medical Media Mad, like Dr. Morse, what were the healing properties of food? Why actually should you avoid cow's milk? Why should you avoid cheese? Why should you avoid what food is actually doing? And all of it was overwhelming at first, but it just resonated with me the more I heard watching these documentaries, and actually just the healing benefits of what are the healing benefits of a potato? And looking into all of that, it just resonated with me and made sense at that point. And I'd probably got to such a point, I'd done 2 years medical, it's all we know, right? So also it's like, well, how do I go against everything I've ever been taught, everything I've known, trusting medical to trusting a documentary I've watched or somebody saying they've how do I just got to a point I had no option. I'd done the medical, I'd given everything I could. I was no better. So yeah, for me, it was really watching those documentaries, reading up and realizing, well, this other route is not working for me. And as I say, I could feel the bladder at its worst. So once I knew and I read more about actually, I also looked into the olden days. They actually used to put people in fruit hospitals. So you can look and find some of this in the internet. There was fruit hospitals when they didn't have medication, they didn't have any of that. You were put in like a week stay in the hospital and just fed fruit. Where does the saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away? All of those things that are eating with me, they have come somewhere from a reason. Why are you told to eat your 5 fruit and veg a day? All of these that have been passed on, because actually we've just lost somewhere along the way the tales and the meaning behind them. But yes, I had no option other than to give this a shot, and those documentaries were crucial in that for me as well.
Okay, no, thank you for sharing that. Also, Laura, at what point when you started your healing process with the natural foods, at what point did you decide to start the medication? Was it right away, or you kind of like did them both side by side for a little bit?
So I started the diet in the September 2016. Yeah, I'm 4 years. So September 2016, I started the diet. I actually was wrong at that initially as well, because I tried to do raw, and I don't believe that you just need to be raw. So I was eating potatoes raw and all sorts, and then I'd just do some raw and eat some cooked. But yeah, I was doing medication at the same time, and I did that probably up until the Christmas, and then I realized, actually, and again, this is just my story, I'm not a doctor, just covering myself. But at that point, I decided in December, I'm going to give up the meds, and I'm going to just go, just because the people I'd spoken to, what I'd learned about medication. I had been on a host of meds as well, right? So I'd put on 2 stone, and old conditions had come up. I was feeling worse all over. And I just thought I need a break from all of this. And I don't think that's an easy decision to make. I think people feel very differently about, should you do medication, should you not? And it has to ultimately be your own choice. But for me, I had read a lot about medication, and I just knew it was wrong. I'd learned that at this point, the more I'd spoken to people, that autoimmune, whatever condition that you're suffering, be it Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, ME, all sorts, I think we're all suffering from the same thing. And it's 3 things that I think it is. I think, again, you with your migraines even, it depends what organ is affected by you. But ultimately, what's your weakest organ? For me, it happens to be the bladder. For you, it's clearly something within the brain. But we're all suffering, in my belief, and again, this is just my belief, bad bacteria, too much of the bad coming in, not enough of the good, and we're overloaded with bad bacteria. I believe it's candida, so yeast, and I also believe it's parasites. So everybody has parasites, but I believe these just get to another level. So they're the 3 things I really focused on for me, that I had heard time and time again, that just resonated that must be it. And I knew I was offloading all my good bacteria by all the antibiotics I was taking. Yeah. So I had the bad bacteria, strains and strains and strains, and so many different types of bacteria from the tampon. But equally, candida had always been an issue for me, parasites, and I just knew that when you take medication, they enhance those things. So it just kind of balanced. Again, people who are on medication, you don't have to come off it. That's just my own personal story, my own belief, and that's where I went.
And yes, I'll make a full disclosure when we upload the video, saying that we're not doctors, that everybody should check with their doctor on whether or not they continue or they stop the medication. That's up to them and their doctor. But what you're saying about candida, and you're right. So antibiotics, a lot of people have a lot of faith in antibiotics. I am very careful with antibiotics, because they can kill your good bacteria, they can kill your bad bacteria, but more often than not, they leave bad bacteria in you, or they leave you with basically no bacteria. So the bad one starts to overpopulate your organs or your gut. So I'm very careful with antibiotics as well. A lot of people take them, like my father, for example, he suffers from a kidney chronic disease. Mm-hmm. And his line where he does the dialysis gets infected quite often, and he does antibiotics 5 to 6 times a year. And I'm like, no wonder why he feels low in energy, he feels nauseous, he feels headaches. I'm like, no wonders, because they're poisoning you with all these antibiotics so many times a year. So for you to basically start a cleaner diet, where you gave up pizza, where you gave up all these other things, and you focus on vegetables and fruits, you're not feeding the bacteria, the bad bacteria anymore. You're not feeding the candida that loves gluten, that loves sugars, that loves all those things, because now you're eating healthy stuff. So for people that, if you need antibiotics because your infection is too bad, obviously, that's necessary. But if you feel that you can probably heal from doing something more natural, like feeding yourself fruits and vegetables that are going to fight off candida and other bacteria, I think the natural way would be a good way to go.
So as interesting as part of that, so I will tell you I have healed two separate things that are generalized infections through natural herbs, because herbs are also a big part, right? This wasn't just diet for me. But I've healed a UTI So a year, 2 years into my healing, I actually did get a what they detect is a urine infection. I think I was suffering that anyway, but it was a UTI on top of interstitial cystitis, which I can't even explain. But I knew I didn't want antibiotics. So I used, and I have helped so many people with this I suffered with UTI since I was like 16, let's not forget. Up at this point, I was 30. And I took Golden Seal. I took Golden Seal and I took oil of oregano, and I maintained my diet. And I healed the UTI, and everybody was telling me, oh, you need to take, what about your kidneys? And I just continued with the Golden Seal, and that took away the infection. I have never had a UTI since then, and that was 2.5 years ago.
Wow.
So Golden, because I felt, again, personally, no doctor, but was that the antibiotics were just pushing the infection further into the body. It wasn't addressing the problem. But actually, so a UTI that I'd got from sex, which is quite common for people with interstitial cystitis, and I was afraid of sex. I then had used Golden Seal again, and I'm still with that partner today. So I have cleared out whatever that bacteria I was reacting to, that I never react to it again. So that was huge for me. The other side I have done is I had an abscess on my teeth as I was healing. Oil of oregano, I used clove, and I used coconut oil pulling, and that disappeared naturally as well. So for me, there's many things that can heal naturally. I'm proof of that, of not just in an autoimmune illness, but actually live infections that have happened that I've since healed naturally. And all I ever knew when I had UTIs was to take antibiotics. Interestingly, as it kind of interlinks. So years before my IC and before the retained tampon, I had been put on a drug called Roaccutane, which I don't know if you can say, it's a very, well, I feel certain ways about that drug. It made me very emotional. I'm a very happy, upbeat person. It made me very depressed. To this day, when I started working with a naturopath and Nate healer, and I'll cover that in a second, what Nate is, but that she basically determined what was wrong with my body and what had caused this. And actually, I think my issue stemmed back to taking, so had I had a retained tampon and I'd not taken these tablets 4 years prior, I probably would have been able to fight that off naturally. Had I not done a lifestyle of antibiotics, of smoking, of drinking, whatever, toxicity, it probably wouldn't have affected me as much as it had. But my body was probably already in that state, ready to just teeter over. So I don't believe it was just I had a retained tampon and then I suddenly got IC. I think it was slowly building in the body, and that was from and I think that was antibiotics. Roaccutane really did a number on me. You're told a host of side effects. I had this skin condition, which I now know is folliculitis. It was all over my back. It was all over my legs, a rash. And I was told that, again, I went to specialists, dermatologists in the hospital, who all told me it was a candida issue. It actually wasn't. It was a bacterial issue that then I determined through Nate. So it was all being treated wrong anyway. But the Roaccutane, I was told that was the strongest drug. They were going to put me on that. But the side effects, and this always amazes me now, when I look back and you take medication and you are given a list of side effects and you go, yeah, because you want to be so well. I didn't even associate with what that must have meant. So the Roaccutane side effects is like this big. And then it's also that you have to go and get liver tests weekly because it does severe damage to your liver. Oh, no problem, I'll still take the drugs. And also that if I was pregnant, I would have to abort my baby because it could cause severe, all these things that I just now think, but because I so wanted, at that point, again, I was in my early 20s when I had the follicles. I'd do anything to get rid of the skin rash. It was out, I felt a way about it. And when you take Roaccutane, your skin peels off. So you get dry skin. You are literally like a snake. So again, when I think about what this must have been doing internally, if that was externally, and I was meant to be on a 9-month course, but I lasted 3 months because I couldn't side effects. And I became seriously in a depressed, which was never me because I was so happy. People have committed suicide who've been on that drug. Again, disclaimer, but that you read certain people. I'm not a doctor, etc., etc. But anyway, I then realized that my IC actually was caused way back to years and years and years for me of things like Roaccutane, of UTI drugs. I think the tampon hit me over the edge, but I don't think that was just my root cause. I think it was a host of things. What I also think, very much that happens, one big thing I am into is meditation. Yep. I think stress, and it doesn't have to be anything major. We all go through stress in life, stressful jobs. Relationships can be stressful with friends or with people, just general. I had also lost 2 people, my grandparents actually, in the period up to me getting ill. And stress can do a number on the body, that it causes inflammation, it causes bad bacteria to be released. So this is, interesting facts where you start looking at parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And the way we live now, the sympathetic nervous system is in constant overdrive. It is never, and it was never meant to be that way. It's meant to be active to protect you in necessary situations, but now it's constant. And for me, I feel that well, I know because through therapy we learned what it was. I think the grief also had set me over the edge. So antibiotics. So I think stress is a huge one, and I work with a lot of people in helping them. Meditation, stress that can do a number on the body. Great documentary to watch is called Heal. I don't know if you've ever seen that on Netflix, and that's all about just the mind and how the mind affects the body. So yeah, that's just an extra. But yeah, for me, that in terms of antibiotics, it was a no-brainer. And now when I say it, I just think, gosh, that was so obvious. But at the time, it wasn't, because I was so in, I didn't know what I know.
Laura, when you talk meditation, so I agree. So the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, when you're in the sympathetic one that is always active, your body cannot recover or heal because you're constantly in fight or flight. You're constantly like scared and all these symptoms and all this stress. So when you start to relax with the parasympathetic, your body takes that moment to, okay, now we can start rebuilding our cells and neurons and get better and relax. What do you do for meditation? Because so a lot of people seem to think that meditation is only sitting down and humming or being quiet for long periods of time. And I tell them, no, there's different types of meditation. For some people, listening to affirmations is meditation. For some people, dancing could be meditation. For me, I do yoga. I do humming sounds. I do breathing techniques. Hey. Yeah. So what about you? What type of meditation works for you?
So now I am a guided meditator. So I actually do it as a job now. So that's why my illness actually came the other way. So I do guided meditations with people, and for me, there's a host of different meditations you can do. And it's like anything, likewise diet, the very first thing is you have to commit to it. You're not going to do one meditation and suddenly your whole life is walking on air and it's brilliant. It's just not how it works. The same with healing through a diet, through herbs. It's a journey, and it's not, there's this along the way. So for me, the very first thing is anything like that you commit to, you commit to it. And you do practices. So I will do I might speak once a week, and I'll do a 40-minute meditation. Some days we might do 20 minutes. It depends what is right for them. And I go through different areas. You can do journeys, which take you into real kind of deep visualized places. Or you can do ones that are for me, it's really getting in touch with the inner self. And it's really, your inner self always knows. So the questions you asked me at the beginning of this interview was around, how did I know fruit and veg was right? How did I know what to do with diet? Well, actually, my inner self knew, like I said, with even interstitial cystitis, but we choose to close down the inner voice. It's too quiet too often, your gut feeling that everybody talks about. So I do a lot around that, around getting connected to yourself and listening to your inner voice. For me, it's not about shutting off thoughts. It's not about any of that, but it's actually getting to a point of enjoying your thoughts, but also seeing how your thoughts can visualize what you become. So I did a lot initially around, before as a guided, was a lot around, I started working on the breath when I was in my, my throes of my illness. And I did a lot of positive chanting I actually spoke to my bladder to say, you can heal, you will get better. In the same token, I allowed myself to have days where I just cried and I hit my pillow and I thought everything was over. But I didn't let that continue. It had to be you will get better, you will. That's how I very much started. My meditations are much deeper than that now. But as an initial was, recognizing those negative thoughts and turning them into positive. That does not happen overnight. Now, what I'd say to anybody, whether you suffer autoimmune or not, is when you do meditation, it's really just getting in touch with yourself. And actually, I just look at it as it's calming my sympathetic nervous system and it's working on my parasympathetic. So it's taking time out from life. That's all it is. It's actually taking time out from all of this and these thousands and thousands of thoughts we think every day. And I think it's brilliant. People go out and exercise and do yoga. Like that is fantastic. But how often do people just get in touch with their body? They don't. We just don't. So actually doing, and as I said, you don't have to do 40-minute meditations every day. I'm aware people have life, but you should do that. But equally, you can take 5 minutes where you just focus on your breathing. I teach people how to do just the breath work. But for me, those meditations go a bit deeper into what area you're covering. There could be, I did something with somebody before this, which was very much, she needed to look at letting be in her life. And she's been poorly with autoimmune. She's very much thinking about the future, the past, rather than in the present moment. That's huge for me. Letting go of certain, and I think when you start meditating, things can come up you didn't even realize were there. One came up for me that was, an ex-boyfriend from when I was 16, my first boyfriend, my first breakup. But I had never addressed that feeling of rejection. How many people do address it, actually? So while I was over the boyfriend and that it wasn't about him, it was just how had I felt in that moment. Yeah. And how, did my illness brought up a lot of those things and brought up a lot of, and it just spiraled and spiraled. Of course it does when you're suffering so badly. That really, I did meditation probably 1.5 years, 2 years into my journey, much deeper to what I do now and the deeper, longer meditations. But it really was just about that inner strength, that inner voice, and knowing that everything actually would be okay, and that belief to not give up, and just finding calm in my day where I didn't think about my illness, because my brain was 24/7 and I was Googling 24, and I mean 24/7 because there were times I was not sleeping, 24/7 on the illness. So this was a 20-minute out of my day where I just focused on breathing. Even, there was times I say where I did the positive and that made me think about the illness, but there was some times where it was just focused somewhere else, not frantically Googling, not on all the sites, just not talking about IC, so yeah.
Something that I often do myself, for example, when I don't have 20 or 40 minutes to meditate, which I usually try to meditate at least 10 to 15 minutes every day.
Brilliant.
But what I do when I'm on a rush type of thing, and I don't know how you feel about this. Number one, I do a 5-minute body scan. So I think about like my head, my hair, my ears, my eyes. So I start feeling every single part of the body until I get to my toes, and then I say that I'm grateful for every single part. Then the other thing that I do, even while I'm busy, is positive mantras. Just as I'm doing whatever, I think I'm healthy, I'm balanced, I'm strong. Yes, I will be healthy, I'm balanced, I'm strong. So how do you feel about that? Do you feel that somebody that doesn't have the time to do something like that too? Absolutely.
Amazing to hear. And that's exactly the type of things I did when I was poorly. And I think it was something I was talking about. I know this helped somebody who had sort of panic attacks, actually. And you can have somebody speaking, when you have a bladder condition, that can happen anywhere you're traveling, or if you don't know where the nearest bathroom is or whatever, and whatever condition you have, there's something you will associate being in public makes you nervous. So big thing for me was that is exactly the body parts. It helps people to sleep as well, focusing on core centralized focused points in the body, but also it's feeling grounded. So often connecting to your feet and the soles of your feet and where they are. So feeling with your eyes closed, I can feel my feet, they're on the ground, they're safe, supported. I feel safe and I feel supported now. And easing into the feet is a very strong one. But absolutely, you've nailed it. I think it's brilliant what you're doing. And it is that, that it's so strong. And that thankful that you mentioned, I'm thankful for this, and this. huge. Your body hears those things. People can think that is all out there. It's not. Believe me, I used to think that, and it is just so incredibly powerful, and it's finding calm within the body from all of this that's going on. Ultimately is so beneficial and healing.
Yeah, Laura, so now that you're much better, you heal yourself naturally, have you gone back to those forums where people were negative, saying, no, you can never find a cure for this, you will never get better? Have you ever gone back to maybe try and reassure them and say, hey, listen, I'm a success story. I myself got better. Have you tried talking to a few people or no?
I'm very active on Instagram, so I talk to a lot of people about healing. I'm an admin of a page on Facebook, which is Healing IC Holistically. That was a page I first turned to, and I became an admin, I think, about a year ago. They were incredible, but I have not gone back to the ones that were really negative. Okay. Because I think there's sometimes people who are just negative. So I don't, and I get it because I lived, but I haven't gone right back to those ones I first did. But I'm very active on Instagram. I will go and tell people my story. I look at people with chronic conditions. I'll share with them. I very much, as I say, I am Healing IC holistically. I work with a lot of people. I think when you talk natural, you have to be careful because some people are ready for it and some people are not. So you cannot and I never have been somebody who would force down people my way of thinking. Now I believe it's the only way, and I've learned a lot about it, and I would do nothing else. But equally, I also know people have to be ready, and they have to, sometimes it's a journey getting there. Most people do get there, and the people you see, who I speak to so many people in a day. But yeah, I'm cautious to not. So it's in it's in the right way. So I publicize very much on my journey, and I'll tell you something that was big for me. Actually, was letting out what the illness was. I didn't tell people for a long time what it was or that I was ill. So actually, I remember being told, just releasing that it was a bladder condition because I was embarrassed because I was 30, and that was just for me. But I released that socially. I think maybe a year into my healing. So I was still flaring and I was still bad, but I shared the journey. And again, that's just me. Everybody's different. Yes. I shared the journey with everybody. So I've been very public about it. And so many people then have different conditions that have come up. People who I went to school with. This isn't just people who I've met through chronic illness, who also have conditions. So I think it's, for me, sharing has been big. And I will always be an advocate for that because going back to the forums, something I was told, and it rings true today, you are always going to hear bad news stories because when people are feeling well and people are feeling better, you don't need to vocalize it. You don't need to write it out. You're out living your life. So we forget that forums are full. And I was the person on the forum, writing my sad tale and, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get better because I was so in it. Now I'm better, I choose to help and speak to people, but I can see why people then just want to go and they want to forget that period of their life happened and they want to go out and live life. And we forget when we're on forums that actually that's many people who are suffering like us, they're in the throes of it. Whereas there's so many people out there who are thriving, living a life, but they're not going to be writing about it. So you're getting an unfair story from the get-go on a forum and an unfair ratio because why would you be on it when you're healed? Yeah,
you're right. And that happens a lot. A lot of people that are better move on from that time because it reminds them of the dark moment or because now they are out living life. So you're right. It happens quite a bit. Laura, where can people find you?
So you can find me, I need to check this and it's really bad. I don't know off the top of my head because so many people ask me and I think, so you can find me on Facebook, Laura Simo, or you can SIMMO, or you can find me at Laura_Simpson85 on Instagram, Laura Simo, SIMMO, authentically me. That's where you'll find me on Instagram. But yeah, lots that I've shared there in the journey. I've shared videos as going through the moment.
What does the future hold for you, Laura?
Well, I'm going to remain on my diet because people ask me that a lot. Can you eat other foods now? And I can. I occasionally have fish. So I will now I'm in my 5th year of when I started this. So I might once a month have fish now, plain fish, just boiled. I don't add anything to it. I had chips the other day. I've had them twice this year, but I don't feel to eat that food. So I'll probably have some of that a little bit more, but I'll stick with the diet 90% of the time because my skin feels better. I feel more alert. I feel energetic. It's not just about the bladder, you know, what it's brought me. My hair is thicker. My hair is better. So yeah, the future holds for me sticking with that diet, continuing to share the story because I think people need to hear good news stories. And it's now about the guided meditation, really working with people on guided meditations, doing classes, doing one-to-ones with people. And that was nothing about, you know, when I did this, it's because it's made such a difference in my life. So it wasn't there was never a plan to go and do this as a long term, but meditation has been so moving to me and I believe it. I'm enjoying sharing that with others and meeting some wonderful people part of it. I do some radio work. I'm here in Barbados at the moment, so I'm from the United Kingdom. After thinking I'd never travel, I'm here in Barbados. I do some radio work over here, which is all about kind of positivity. It's the positive corner, as we like to call it. It's not about necessarily autoimmune. It's just general life, meeting lots of different people, talented singers, talented plant-based people, actually. My next interview is with somebody who lives a plant-based life over here. She's a chef, so I'm meeting her. But it's not all about that. It's different elements. So that's one side. And I think just, continuing to share good news stories, enjoying health and enjoying how much more healing illness has brought me, because it's brought me so much more than just the symptoms of the bladder. It's really changed my life, my relationships, how I view the world. So it's just enjoying that.
Nice. Laura, my last question for you is, this channel is called Find Your Chappiness. So basically, find your happiness. What does Laura do to find her chappiness?
Be as herself. I'm just myself and I just enjoy what makes me happy. I don't worry what anybody else thinks. That was another thing I learned as part of healing. I randomly play the bagpipes. So I play the bagpipes. Yes, so that's that. Happy, dancing, singing. I love doing all of that. Interacting with people, meditating, socializing, meeting new people. And I think, I think happiness is within. I think it's within all of us. You need to dig deep and you need to find it, and you'll all find that happiness, and living your best life that is your life, that doesn't worry what other people think, doing what makes you happy as and when. And the beach makes me happy, and sunshine, to be honest. Where I am now makes me pretty happy.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Laura, well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Love learning your story, learning your journey. I'm happy to find out that you're a success story, that you found healing, especially natural. That's even better. And continue doing the great work you're doing, and then we'll chat soon.
Thank you. An absolute pleasure to meet you. Thank you for having me. And I love what you're doing. I think it's amazing. So well done to you, and thank you.
All right. Thanks, Laura. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.